For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Sashni Woodley. Author Luke Alfred joins me to discuss his book, Early One Sunday Morning, I Decided to Step Out and Find South Africa. Welcome, Luke.
Hi, thank you.
At the beginning of your book, you state that you wanted to look at South Africa in a different way and that you were tired of the media's white noise. Can you explain what you meant, and was this the reason you decided to write this book?
Not solely. There were other reasons. But I have been employed in the media for 20 years, on and off, formally, informally. I'm now a freelance journalist. And I have a sort of a healthy disrespect for the South African media. And for the way in which it's going. You know, the fact that news is now compressed into sound bites and things you can read on your smartphone. And I really just wanted to try and reach another part of South Africa, a part of South Africa which wasn't covered by the media, really. You know, life out there, ordinary life, for want of a better cliche, really. And I found a good way to do that. Walking is very interesting. It's very psychologically interesting. It's very interesting at the level at which you see things. You know, you ramble and you leave yourself open to various experiences on the road. And they can't be sort of foreknown in advance. And I like that idea in the book.
You weave in history according to the places that you visit. So, for example, the Cape immigration scheme, the Pringle family's history, and facts about Gandhi. What was your research for this book?
Sort of on the cuff, really. I realized quite quickly in the genesis of the book that I couldn't just walk a landscape. Okay, so there had to be some available backstory. I had to do some research. So, you know, there was Pringle research, there was settler research in the Corrie Library at Rhodes when I did the Salem to Southwell walk. There was research in the various libraries of Cape Town for the Table Mountain walk. There was some pre-research for Soweto. And the reason I did that was because I knew that I then had a narrative scaffolding upon which to sort of peg my story. And so with backstory, you can always, when the landscape becomes too boring or too dry and too dusty, and you don't particularly want to bother your reader with your experiences at that point, you can digress. You can go into a little historical anecdote. You can tell another story, and then you're back on the path, and you walk your path, you walk your road. So there did have to be research because it laid another dimension. There was suddenly another layer of story to what I was doing. And that was important also for narrative pacing. You know, there are a lot of things woven into this book, as you know. You know, there's some autobiography. There's some reflections on contemporary South Africa. There's some reflections on South African literature. You know, a whole lot of things. I didn't want it to be a uniform road.
In one chapter, you travel the line by Alan Paton's Cry the Beloved Country's character, Stephen Khumalo. Why did you decide to make this particular trip, and what were the highlights?
Look, it was far out, you know, it was interesting. Just to give the viewer a little bit of insight, in Alan Paton's Cry the Beloved Country, Reverend Stephen Khumalo comes up to look for his son, Absalom, who's estranged. He's gone missing in the big city. And the train that he takes to get to Johannesburg features two journeys, one on a narrow gauge railway and one on he takes a midnight thunder from Durban to come up, and one on a far broader gauge. Okay, and the narrow gauge railway still exists. And I thought, hey, but the wonderful thing to walk, find out what's going on there. I mean, there's some sort of steam railway enthusiasts down in that part of the world as well. So that was kind of tacked onto the walk. And you know, I just thought, in keeping with what I've said already, there was a very convenient backstory there, which is the story of, you know, Khumalo coming up onto the Rand from his little pondok in rural KZN. And I wanted to see what that landscape showed me in the present.
You write that one of the joys of walking is that it gives you time to see things you would otherwise miss. What are some of the things that stood out for you on your journey?
Look, that's quite a difficult question to answer, but I will answer it. I want to say that walking is at a human pace. And one of the things that's very interesting about our contemporary digitalized world is that things are very quick, they're very bite-sized, they're very sound bite-ish. And I wanted to try and escape that. I wanted to try and escape the digitalization of the world. And I wanted to escape the view from the aeroplane window, from the speeding car window. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to give things a more meandering and human scale. Because why? Because you see things, you observe, you can stop, you can go back. So you have a whole lot of alternatives on the ground, which you might not if you're speeding across a landscape. And then to answer the second half of the question, what are the things that I really enjoyed? What did I see? One of the most profound walks for me was the Table Mountain walk. I really enjoyed that walk. I went up via Constantia Neck. I arrived on what's called the back table. So not what you see in the postcards, but sort of from around the back, basically. And a lot of early morning walkers were streaming off the mountain. Consequently, I had the mountain to myself. So from about 10 o'clock in the morning, Table Mountain was mine. And it was a beautiful day, not too hot, a little bit of wind, and I could just walk, basically. And those dams are fabulous feats of engineering. They really are, made by a Scottish engineer called Thomas Stewart in the 1890s, when the city of Cape Town was running out of water. And, any parallels? Yeah. And that was probably the nicest walk. But the Soweto walk was wonderful in a very different way. Walking with my dad, who is 79, was a very memorable occasion. I got a bit irritable with him, but he pondered a bit. But he is 79, so he was forgiven. And the last walk, which is a nice way to end the book, which was the Reconciliation Road chapter. So, as you know, we walked from Voortrekker Monument to Freedom Park on Freedom Day in April this year. And so there was a kind of a harmony there, which I thought was nice and symmetrical and harmonious for the closure of the book. And I enjoyed that walk. That was memorable in a quiet, dignified South African way, because we walked with a mixed group of people.
Now, as you've said, one of your walks took you to Soweto. You tell us how Soweto got its name, and you tell us about your guide, Vuka Shabalala,
yes,
as well as a history lesson on James Mpanza. Can you tell us a little about the Soweto trip and a little about James Mpanza?
Well, look, I did the Soweto walk sort of early in the year. It was about in mid-January. It was very hot and very muggy. It had rained heavily the night before. And so there was that sort of high-felt evidence of heavy rain on the streets. And part of Soweto is sort of built around the Klip River, really. And it was a hot, sticky, humid day. And Vuka was in his element, actually. He led the walk and he marched up hills, and there I was, a sort of straggling whitey, sort of making notes in my notebook, thinking, where on earth have these guys got to? So that was very nice. And I like Vuka sort of is very sort of turned on to James Mpanza. There's some sort of emotional connection and some political affiliation there, and he really likes him. He was, as I say in the book, he was a dangerous outlier. Vuka is trying to sort of create a place for himself in the Soweto Heritage Trail, and I really like the guy, and I like that community.
You're right that Soweto had a strong sense of itself, a swaggering community, and that there was pride in the city of needs and rebels, clamor and soul that you will not find elsewhere. Can you explain why this is?
Look, I probably can't because I'm not a sort of historian of Soweto. There's a sense of community, a sense of commonality, a sense of pride. I would go further than that. I would say extreme pride. And because of where we come from in apartheid, and apartheid, as much as anything else, it wasn't only a spiritual and a political system, it was a spatial system. So, people were divided spatially and physically from one another. And Soweto's just lovely. It has a very, very it has a sort of a calm pridefulness, which I really enjoyed.
On your last walk, you gathered the people that you had met on your previous trips, as you've said, and you all walked from the Voortrekker Monument to Freedom Park. Tell us about the significance of this walk.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the first thing to bear in mind, and I have to thank my father for this, we were talking about it around the dinner table. My mother is deceased, and so we entertain my father every Sunday night. We have a ritual. He comes round to dinner. And I was telling him about the book and the plans for the concluding chapters. And he said, you must be very careful to walk from Voortrekker Monument to Freedom Park. Don't walk from Freedom Park to Voortrekker Monument. Then you're walking backwards. You're walking backwards into politics, backwards into time. And it was very, very difficult logistically to arrange it, because the two parties are side by side and linked by Reconciliation Road, but the two parties don't really talk. They don't have any sort of real engagement. But we found out that, in actual fact, after having been closed, Reconciliation Road was reopened this year. And so I have my wife to thank for doggedly pursuing the media liaison people on both sides of Reconciliation Road, and we walked it. And what we did is we gave opportunity to everyone I'd walked with, on whose land I'd walked, whether it was Julian Pereira in KZN, whether it was the Pringles of the Eastern Cape, whatever. We gave them, we knew it was unlikely that they would all be able to take up on the invitation, but we gave them the opportunity, and we said, on Freedom Day we're walking, we will provide food and drink and what have you. All we ask is you get here. And some people were able to honor that and take advantage of that. Others weren't. VUCA brought a crowd from Soweto, which was great, including some children. And you need children in a situation like that, because they're free and they don't care, and so they did cartwheels through the through the border posts, such as they were, which exist on the edges of both properties. But that was a nice way to finish. Yeah.
And after spending more than a year walking around the country, what is your impression of South Africa?
It's a lovely question. We are teetering on a knife edge as a country at the moment. But what I will say is that there is a sense of endurance and a sense of love of this land for all of our people, which we dismiss at our peril.
What do you hope people will take away after reading this book?
I hope they'll take away what I've just said. I hope they'll take away that idea of sort of very cautious hope and pridefulness. That there's something bigger in this country, something far bigger than number one falling asleep in the medium-term budget address. Something more significant. There are 60 million people in this country. They're here for better or for worse. We're now beginning to realize what democracy really, what the present of democracy, the blessing of democracy really means. That it means in part struggle, actually. But I believe that there's I'm repeating myself in part, but I believe that there's sort of a degree of endurance in this country. And what I would hope that people take out of the book is, I would also hope that there's some fun and there's some enjoyment. People need to read for pleasure. It's not like slogging through Paradise Lost in second year English at varsity. You must be enjoying what you're doing. So I hope that the language moves them. I hope some of the insights and the history move them. I hope they'll tell their friends and their family about this book. I hope they'll buy it as Christmas presents. Shameless plug by author. I just hope that people don't get too caught up in cynicism and blasé attitudes about dismissing our country.
And what can we expect from you in future?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm splashing about. What happens with me after a book has been delivered and I go through that the sort of swelling of pride, that takes about 2 weeks. My head then reduces in size. Then I begin to be critical about the book. Then I go through a sort of blue, depressed period, and then I start thinking about what am I going to do next. And I'm flirting with all kinds of things. I'm thinking about a Boer War book. I'm thinking about some fiction. I am a sports journalist in other respects. So I was thinking about doing something on a book of cricket photographs, actually. But I haven't decided. And it's important that I sort of take my time before I do decide.
Great. Thank you very much, Luke.
Absolute pleasure.
That was author Luke Alfred speaking to Creamer Media's Policy about his latest book.